Suck it, Dylan. That was way better than before. Welcome back once more to Form Check Friday, guys. We're here at Calgary Barbell. In this episode, we tell everybody to extend their backs and push their deadlifts off the floor. All right, getting down to brass tacks here. First video comes from Charlie. He's 16. He's been lifting for about 3 months. And he sent us a squat and a deadlift, it looks like. So in your squat, Charlie, the biggest thing I want you to focus on is trying to keep your upper back tight. Looks like we're kind of doing some weird things. We're not maybe not quite locked in as well as we could be in terms of pulling the bar down into your back. The other thing I want you to do is try to slow your descent a little bit. It looks like you're really kind of dive bombing into the bottom. And when you do that, the knees are rocking forward, you're coming onto your toes. So we also want to make sure we're trying to maintain a little bit more pressure through the whole foot into the ground. Try and keep that weight sort of centered over your midfoot. And the last and final thing is that as you come out of the hole, your weight's shifting way back onto your heels and your butt's coming up behind you. So we want to try and limit that by keeping your knees forward over your toes as you change directions. Now that's a whole bunch of stuff, and you've only been lifting for 3 months in this video, so honestly a lot of it's just going to be practice, but try and take those cues, maybe focus on one a week until you can kind of implement all of them. If you try to implement too many things and change too many things at once, it's going to be pretty challenging because you're just going to be overthinking your squat. And part of squatting and lifting in general is that you kind of just need to do it. These cues should be small adjustments, but the biggest thing is just going to be more practice, buddy. And your deadlift, you said again your hips sort of shoot up, and you're correct, it does look like that. And I think the biggest cause is that you're really far forward on your feet when you initiate your deadlift. So what I want you to try to do is I want you to take a little bit more time, try and get back on your heels before you start the deadlift, which is gonna make it harder to get your back extended, but that's gonna take some practice and maybe some stretching of the hips and hamstrings, that kind of stuff. The basics of the pull itself look really good, but like I said, I want you to start a little bit further back on your heels because you're kind of ending up there anyways, and work on keeping especially that low back extended. It looks like right now we're starting to, you know, by the end of that set you sent in, you're starting to cave in that low back, so let's try and keep that nice and flat. Next one coming from Hassan, and he's deadlifting 315 for 5 reps. Says he has a problem that his hips shoot up before the lift, so he was told to raise his hips from the beginning, but he can't quite get the form figured out. So let's take a look, Hassan, and see what we're doing with the deadlift. So it looks like you're in a decent position when you set up, but we're pretty much stiff-legging it off the floor. So what I want you to do is not necessarily sit your butt down, but shift your whole weight back. So if this is your shoulder and the butt of my palm here is the barbell, you're kind of out in front of it. What I want you to do is shift all of your weight back so you're a little further back on your heels, just like I was telling Charlie there, so we can get that angle a little more straight up and down from the shoulder to the bar, and that's going to allow you to get more into that sort of push off the floor. It looks like you're doing a good job of keeping your back flat, everything's good there, but I think if we shift everything back more than focusing on sitting your butt down, and then just being a little bit more patient off the floor. It's a big cue that I like to use with a lot of people is to be patient off the floor and make sure that we're maintaining positioning as you initiate the deadlift. Some pause deadlifts might help with that too. All right, our next one here is from Wayne Lee. Now Wayne sent me some footage from a meet that he did in Hong Kong, which is super cool. So your squat looks really, really good, Wayne. I wouldn't change anything there. He sent in his squat, bench, and deadlift. We're gonna go through his bench and his deadlift. All right, so really the only thing there, and you were able to recover from it really well, Wayne, was as you come down, the bar kind of dumps forward out in front of your elbows, and that can cause a little bit of looseness and a little bit of shoulder pain maybe long term. It's very, very slight, but as you come to your chest, the bar kind of reaches out in front, and then you have to pull it back into position off the chest. So what I want you to try to do is I want you to try to keep your elbows under the bar, tucked in a tiny bit more during the touch, and try to maintain a little bit more tightness in your touch. Like I said, it looked like you maintained pretty well in that rep and sort of came back from it really well off the chest. But as you progress, we might run into issues with that sort of habit. And with the deadlift, we just need to set up a little harder. We just need to set up a little better, build a little bit more tension through the back. It looks like we might be sort of crowding the knees, which is something I often talk about, but your grip is really, really close, and it's not allowing your knees to get out, which is not allowing your back to get fully extended. So I think if you widen your grip ever so slightly, push the knees out a tiny bit, and really work on trying to get a little bit more tilt in your pelvis this way, try and get a little bit more back extension, and that'll solve that. Other than that, looks really good, buddy. Next video comes from Stanley, and we're looking at a squat here. So he had a hamstring injury, causes squats to feel different. So he's been trying to figure out his technique for 2 months and can't seem to get it nailed down. When he squats, he feels as though he's not using his adductors or hip flexors, because back then they would always be sore after the workout. If you're feeling too much adductor and hip flexor, that might be directly related to why you injured your hamstrings, because they're not prime movers. I mean, you'll feel them a little bit from the stabilization that they're doing, but they shouldn't be the predominantly sore muscle after a workout. So we got 2 squats here. One looks a lot more high bar to me, another one looks a little bit more low bar in terms of the movement. Now the high bar squat, we're definitely noticing a lot of rounding in that low back. So that's the biggest thing I want you to work on, is trying to get some more extension through the low back and sort of force the hips to stretch as you hit the hole, as opposed to letting the back compensate for a lack of mobility in the hips. Now the low bar reps look a lot better actually. You're pushing back a little bit more, you're allowing yourself to lean forward a little more, and that actually looks like it fixes a lot of that. The biggest thing here is I'm noticing we're pretty shrugged up in the shoulders, so that shoulder joint's pretty closed, and you're gonna notice at heavier weights that the bar is gonna kind of pull you forward and round the upper back. So what I want you to do is, right now your elbows are kind of back here, I want you to bring the elbows down a little bit, and as you sit into the hole, try to connect those lats through to your low back. So we're thinking about kind of doing a lat pull down with the bar, maybe thinking about bending the bar around yourself. There's a bunch of different cues we can use to engage the lats, but the biggest one that I use is to just kind of pull on the bar. Just imagine your hands are hooks. You shouldn't be actively holding the bar too hard, or rather not supporting any weight in your hands. You should definitely be gripping the bar, but don't support the weight in your hands. Think more about pulling the bar into your back, and the weight's supported on your rear delts. I would stick with the technique that you're using in that second video more so than the first, because you were able to maintain a much better back angle. I would just work on that upper back tension. Next up, we have one from, I cannot pronounce that because it's in like Russian font, I think, but I'll get Dylan to kind of like bloop, put it up on the screen here real quick. I don't know how to say your name because I can't read that, but we're gonna form check you here. In the squat videos, these 315 for 3 reps, used to be lightweight for 6, but his SI started to hurt, so he had to change his technique. Now no pain, but the spine cracks from belt pressure, which sounds odd. So in the deadlift video, everything looks pretty good. We lose the mid back a little bit, but I think you mentioned in the description that this was a PR lift for you. So, I mean, it's probably just a factor of the weight being a little bit heavy. And in terms of the squat, what we're seeing here, maybe one of the reasons that you had some SI issues, is we're seeing a little bit of movement in that sort of low back and that SI area right as you hit the hole. So I think that's a product of maybe pushing back a little bit too far. So what I'd like to see you do is allow your knees to travel a tiny bit more forward. The other thing you might be able to get away with is widening the stance a tiny bit, but just focus on letting those knees come forward a little bit, and that should help to keep you a little bit more stable through that back angle, and hopefully that alleviates some tension on that SI for you. So the next video here comes from Kyle, and he sent 2 videos. He sent one and asked some questions about his squat here. He said he was making a more conscious effort to stay upright, felt a lot of pressure in his back. In the second video, he noticed his body was collapsing from the first session, so he slowed it down a little into the second session. So I'm gonna get Dylan to sort of juxtapose these videos and show you guys. The first video, he's hitting the hole and his body's kind of, he's losing his back and things are he's kind of squishing at the bottom a little bit instead of maintaining tightness and staying rigid. So when I tell people to sort of slow down and maintain a little bit more contraction into the hole, this is what I'm talking about. You can see from the first video to the second that he collapses through his upper back a lot less. But even if we look at the second video here, we're still seeing a fair bit of collapse. Now, what I want you to do, Kyle, is I want you to actually allow yourself to lean forward a little bit more. I don't want you to focus on staying upright. I want you to focus on keeping your back tight. So keeping the lats locked in, and I want you to start the squat by hinging at the hips a little bit more. So if you start your squat, you push your butt back just a little bit and just maintain pulling those lats down. Don't worry about fighting to stay upright, because it looks like your fight for extension might actually be kind of backfiring here. So let's widen that grip a little bit. pull down on the bar to get the lats on and allow yourself to lean forward a little bit more. I think that's gonna do good things for the amount of tension you're able to hold in your back in the right spots and not feel as much pressure in the back necessarily. So second last, we have one from Austin Zentner, and I think Austin and I actually kind of had a good chat at the Winnipeg seminar. So Austin sent some video of his squats. He had a squat where he inflamed his SI and had a bunch of nerve pain down his leg. So he's wondering if I can see anything that might have set that off. You can notice right as he comes out of the hole, there's a whole lot of low back extension that happens. So his butt shoots up behind him, his back arches really hard, and I can see how that would probably aggravate some stuff. So what I want you to try to do is I want you to focus on, letting yourself lean forward a little bit. You guys will notice through these videos, a lot of times I talk about staying more upright, a lot of times I talk about leaning more, and that's gonna be very person to person, very case to case. There is no dogmatic, like, you should lean when you squat, you should kick your butt back, you should break at the knees. It's all gonna be very different from person to person. Now, because we can see Austin go into a pattern of overextension, I want him to work more on neutrality. It's not that extension is necessarily better as a sort of be all and end all, but a lot of people tend into flexion, not as many tend into overextension, in my experience anyways. So I want Austin to focus more on trying to keep his ribs locked down and his lats locked down, thinking about his rib cage and his trunk like a piston and trying to create tension within the sort of system of his mid and low trunk, and allow a little bit more lean so we're not having the hips kind of rock back up and extend so violently behind him. The other thing Austin sent in is some equipped bench videos, and while I'm no expert there, we're gonna take a look at a couple of them and see if we can maybe offer any advice. So he said he's having trouble keeping the bar from wavering and floating over his neck collarbones as soon as it's off the chest. So I think the biggest thing, and one of the most important things that I learned with my equipped bench is that it's all about holding the tension in your upper back. If when you are almost getting your touch, you come down, because the shirt's binding up here, right? So you're gonna get to about here, the shirt binds up, and then it's easy to let the shoulders out to get the touch. But if you do that, you're gonna fire back, and then you're gonna have to try and sink your shoulders back into position in order to get the lockout. So the biggest thing I would recommend is focusing almost more on your back, on the muscles in between your shoulder blades and your lats, your rear delts, all that kind of stuff, and just making sure you're maintaining positioning first and foremost. And especially as you change directions, I notice I have a tendency myself in the shirt to, as I change directions, just throw everything I have into the bar instead of being controlled in my back and just pressing with my pressing muscles. And that often contributes to me throwing my shoulders out of joint, or sorry, out of position rather, and putting a lot of pressure on my AC joint. And I think part of the reason my rotator cuff is still healing up a little bit from some aggressive overloaded bench. But I think that's gonna be the biggest thing. So make sure that as you change directions, you're not rushing it and throwing your shoulders out of position. Also make sure you're not losing position to get the touch. There is probably some point where you'll have to lose a little bit of position to get the touch, especially in a tighter shirt. But try and limit it and make sure that you're able to then quickly recover, because that can cause a lot of sort of jankiness with your bar path and with the fluidity of your press through to the lockout. And the last one here comes from Diego. Now Diego has bicep pain in his squats, and he sent a video here. It's kind of hard to see your upper back, so just another sort of aside to anybody who wants me to look at something with their upper body in their squat. If you want me to look at your shoulder positioning or the bar positioning on your back, try and send in a video either filmed straight from the back or straight from the front where I could see what's going on with your shoulder. So it's kind of hard to see here, but I have some ideas about why Diego might have some bicep pain. The first one is that it looks like Diego's a pretty thick guy, and it looks like his shoulders are pretty tilted forward. It also looks like he's taking a full grip on the bar, which means that we're kind of getting into this position, maybe over-rotated in the shoulder, probably pretty tight in that sort of anterior socket or anterior shoulder girdle, so pec minor, all that kind of stuff in there. So one of the things I would do, Diego, is I would go in and try to aggressively loosen up your pec and pec minor before you squat, so we can get that shoulder blade moving back a little bit further, because right now it looks like we're kind of tilted forward here. We want to be pulled back a little bit more. That in itself might take care of the bicep pain. The other thing I would try is If you notice as Diego's squatting, when you can kind of see his wrists as he goes towards the re-rack there, his wrists are really cocked back like that. If we can get you to this point where we're a little bit more straight through in the wrists and that shoulder's moving back instead of staying forward and just putting a lot of torque through the sort of elbow shoulder, right here, pull the shoulder back, make sure we're gripping, maybe try a thumbless grip over, straighter wrist position. That could take a lot of stress off the bicep too. So the biggest things you're gonna wanna address are shoulder mobility and your grip position. So I would try with straight wrists, I would try moving your grip maybe a little bit wider, and I would also aggressively sort of break up and mobilize with just a lacrosse ball or something, a bunch of stretching your pecs before you get under the bar. All right, guys, that's it for this Form Check Friday. Hope everybody found the content informative, and I hope that helps people lift more weights and stay further from injury. Thanks again for all the submissions. Hit that subscribe button below, leave a like if you liked it, and we will see everybody for the next one. We're on to January 18th now, so 5 days of progress. Everybody who submits, we're coming for you. We will get to you. See you soon.